Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 167 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Stargate Oral History Project. We've got a couple of shows for you today. This first one is live with David McNally, who's played 3 roles in Stargate SG-1, 2 in SG-1, and 1 in Atlantis. Before we really get into it, if you like Stargate, excuse me, and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, it would mean a great deal if you click the like button. It makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will continue to help the show grow. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. I know you have them. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks on the Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net YouTube channels. As this is a live show, I have David with us, and we are going to be asking him questions about his life, his career, of course, his time on Stargate. So be sure to get those questions that you have for him to our moderators in the YouTube chat. They'll get them over to me, and in the second half of the show, I will get them to David. David McNally, who played Hanno, who played Simon, who played Avrid, Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis way back in the day. Sir, this is a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great for me. I love chatting about the work that we do.
So when did you decide that acting was a thing for you? Were you young? Were you a little bit older? When did this get stuck in your craw and say, you know what? This fits for me. I like this.
I think like a lot of families, we used to do a thing at my grandparents where after dinner, the kids would have to entertain the adults. And so I somehow at a very young age started as the MC. I would get up and introduce everybody and try to tell a knock-knock joke or something like that. And I think just the joy that it brought everyone and brought myself was kind of the hook. And then I think it was grade 2. I played the troll in, the grass is greener on the other side sort of story. I don't know if you remember that one. And
Yes.
that was a hit. And then I played like a version of Scrooge.
Oh,
To a
really?
full gym in grade 2 at the age of 7. So
Oh.
I was hooked. And throughout my education, it was the one subject I enjoyed. I really didn't take to other subjects that well. And of course, by the time I got out of high school, I was destined for university drama education to become a drama teacher. And I also went to the National Theatre School of Canada to train as a theatre actor.
Wow.
And right out of that, I was working. So it was something that's been a part of my life since a very young age.
Wow. How long did you teach?
I've been teaching up until 2 years ago. I retired, which is great. I'm enjoying it.
Right.
I do a little bit of subbing from time to time, but it frees up a lot of time to kind of just enjoy my family
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy living. Because as a drama teacher, it's all consuming. So,
Absolutely.
and I did that throughout my career as an actor. So I would, fly into Vancouver and to Toronto. I would do a gig and I'd come home and I'd get right back into classes, and it kept me pretty busy.
What I have taught myself, definitely not drama though. There is something extraordinary about opening doors for people and watching them walk through them and discover a new best facet of themselves.
Yeah, and part of that has been teaching the tech as well. So, and they're a different sort of bird. The tech kids, they have different interests, but they really bond well, and their collaboration in some ways is stronger than those of the performers.
You mean the people who are running the show behind
Working
the
the
scenes, right?
sound, yeah, working the lighting, doing the props, doing the costumes, all that stuff is so yeah, it's filled up all my days as I raised 4 kids and
Oh my gosh.
that as well. Yeah. All my kids are in their 30s now
Ah,
and
okay.
living their lives, and I've got a granddaughter and
Ah, how wonderful.
good.
If you could do it all over again, what department would you think you would really, sink your
Take
teeth into?
That's a tough one. My eldest son is a documentary filmmaker, and
Okay.
he has so much control in terms of his artistic goals. And I think I would aspire towards that, more towards directing, though I have done lots of directing. My other son has worked both as a dolly grip and as a boom op, and those are interesting too. I think it's, for me, it's been a joy just to be a kind of theater worker because I've done a tremendous amount of stage, both backstage and on stage. I enjoy the theater the most, I would say, but it's hard to say of the crew positions. I think, the dressers, they're a fun bunch. The people that go in before everybody and they make that place look like it should. And so that when actors walk in, it just feels right. I think that's a great job.
There's something so unique about the experience of taking part in a shared mass illusion.
Yeah.
You're all gonna go in there and buy it, or you're not, And I remember watching Avenue Q, which is with Muppets,
Yes.
and the performers are in black, standing right there with the Muppets,
Yeah.
and talking, not hiding that their mouths are moving while they're moving the puppet, and you have to accept the fact that the people in black are not actually there.
Yeah.
And if you allow yourself to do that, it's very easy to almost forget that they're actually standing there.
Well, it is that suspension of disbelief Coleridge talks about, and I think that everybody has to buy into it to really get emotionally connected to the story. You have to let go that you're watching a TV. You have to let go that you're watching actors, and immerse yourself into the emotions that the performers are conveying, the music is conveying, the story is bringing. And once you do that, then yeah, we're caught, right? We get caught up to where we're crying, we're laughing, we're angry at somebody, some character that's doing something on there. And it seems to happen naturally, and it might be something instinctual that, storytelling's been around a long time. So it's in our DNA.
I think it's an intrinsic part of the human experience. We there's a lot of psychological work being done now that it seems to indicate that we view our world in terms of stories. And I don't know if it's because we've been raised in stories or because, like you say, it's just a part of our DNA. That's how we manage to filter the world. But there's definitely a lot going on there, and the best way to relate to someone is through a story.
Yeah. And it happens at childhood, right? The first thing you're doing with your kids is telling them stories. And that's those lessons in mythology that guide them, hopefully establish a foundation to guide them through life.
Is there any particular role that stands out to you as one that was particularly transformative for you as a person, or one that pushed you in directions that you didn't anticipate or did anticipate? And whew, I got through that, but man, was that a journey?
Yeah, I think there's been a few. I mean, mostly the theatrical experience, which
Mm.
for me is a little bit more difficult in
Mm-hmm.
that you don't get to stop. You got to keep going, and the audience's reaction is immediate, and you have to ride off that reaction. When I got to play the Scot from Shakespeare on a major stage here, that was that was transforming because it pushed my craft to a new level. Just being out there the full 2.5 hours and ending with a broadsword fight and all that it took to do 9 shows a week was a tremendous challenge on top of teaching in the
Oh
morning.
my God.
Yeah. So, and then, trying to see your kids and wife at the same time. So that was a big one. But in terms of television, there's been so many different challenges. I did a independent film here in Edmonton, was called 1132 Pleasant Street, and just being a lead actor on a feature film, an independent film, demanded a lot of me personally, just to what I had to sacrifice in order to make that happen. And that type of commitment, I think I really grew from, and it gave me a lot of confidence in approaching more television and approaching my craft.
Mm. Yeah, they're not paying you just for your, your time and your actor skills. They're paying for your brain bandwidth,
Yeah.
and things can. I mean, we've all seen the stories and read the tabloids about how marriages and everything else suffer. When you got people on set for all hosts, or in theater for all hosts of reasons. It's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort to bring life to this thing that exists temporally and then is gone. And just exists in people's hearts and minds.
You're very isolated as a, for me, kind of, I was, more of episodic. I would come in as a guest star or guest lead or principal or something on different shows. You're flown in, you're driven to your hotel, you're driven to set, you meet your wardrobe and your makeup. You might get a chance to meet some of the other actors on that day. You might get a chance to read the script. You may not, most often not, with the other cast members before you go to set. You arrive to set. There's a brief rehearsal after you go through the rigmarole of getting prepared, and then you're shooting, and then it's done. It's in the can. See ya. You're back to your hotel. You're off flying back, and so that isolated world, where you're separated from your community and engaged into a new collaboration where people know each other, and you're trying to do it right for them because it's their baby, and you're just kind of an invited guest. I find that really challenging, and it can be demanding on family, of course, because those months in hotels and stuff like that when you're doing films they really tear at your heart. Because for me, I hated being on the phone to my kids and wife. That was the one thing I just didn't want to do that no more. But I enjoy the craft so much, and I wanted to keep growing as an actor. So it was just, balancing that throughout my life that has allowed me to have the success that I do.
It's great that you recognize it, and it got to do some. Let me get into it. Cor-ai, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the greatest hours of science fiction. Period.
Thank you.
And it is all about the performances on the screen. This was the back half of the first season of Stargate SG-1. I don't believe the show had aired yet. And you are figuring this thing out. Tell us about how you got Hanno.
That's interesting. How did it happen? I think oh yes. I had done an Outer Limits, and I ended up doing 4 Outer Limits over the years, but I had done an Outer Limits, and I think that MGM had seen me in that, some of the producers, and so it got me a crack at Hanno. And so I would usually drive to Vancouver as opposed to fly, just to save a little money. So it's that 13-hour drive from Edmonton, get through the mountains, and straight
split.
Yeah, straight to the audition, and it just worked out really well. And yeah, I really enjoyed Mario as a party. Was the director, I believe, and he kind of took to me. In fact, he brought me over from SG to do another Outer Limits right after it. So I went one to the other on that one. And coming into it, I'm Métis, which is, I'm half Cree and half Scottish Irish. And so for me, it felt like it was very communal, like it was about this small community that's trying to survive against tyranny, oppression. And so I think I kind of took to it that way. And then just the confidence I had from being a stage actor, I think that helped me just to step in amongst the greats, that I was working with, and feel confident to give a performance. I feel I learned a lot in that experience too, and because just with television and film, you have to pull back so much, like the frame is only so big. And as a stage actor, I'm used to, the size and all that stuff. So just that sort of reeling in the craft and allowing it to happen inside and not worrying so much about pushing it out because the camera's coming to find you. And so that's kind of the story behind that one in terms of how I got it, always audition.
How did you read? I think it's the rare person among us who have had to face the killer of a family member. um, on top of someone that the audience recognizes as an ally. Was that tricky?
Um, it was, I think it's because of the experiences and the amount of reading I do. I spend a lot of time reading and just immersing myself into great novels. And you get, again, that emotional connection when you identify with a character or a hero in some way. And it's just, kind of breathing it in, right? To imagine that someone's killed your father and you were a child, and that imagination, and then allowing yourself just to feel it, and not worrying about whether or not you're portraying it real, realistically, because it is real, and everyone's reactions are different to that type of tragedy. So go with the feeling that you have, and allow yourself to believe that it's going to work, without doubting yourself in the journey. Um, I think also just the fact that those actors were so welcoming, that was a place that was easy to walk into, and really comfortable way of working on the set of Stargate. It wasn't someone with a stopwatch trying to push through scenes. Oh, we got it. No, it was like, okay, let's do it right. Let's take our time. Let's figure it out. And there's humor always happening between every take, which keeps everyone light and
Have to have
enjoying
levity. This is, I mean, considering the material that you're dealing with here,
Yeah.
it would be just a mess to get through. Tell us about those courtroom scenes
Yeah,
and
that was
working the opposition with
yeah.
with the different guys.
With that one, I really enjoyed that, because usually my television experiences up until then were, like short scenes, quick dialogue, not a lot of monologue opportunity where you get to take a run at something for a while. And so, and of course, being a stage actor, that was my preference. And so when I got a chance to get into a courtroom, it felt very much like a stage, and to be able to run for a while, to kind of just allow the thoughts to come, and to really have a specific intention in terms of, I want this man dead. I want this Jaffa dead. He's destroyed my life. And so staying focused on my intent, having the opportunity to feel as if I was playing a room, which is so cool, and just the sort of stillness of everyone else within that courtroom allowed my mobility and energy to really zoom in on Christopher for that scene. And for me, I loved it. It was great.
The script is such a tightrope walk because you could have a kid, well, a young man, an adult, who's closed-minded and says, based on his legal system, I don't care what y'all want. I want his head, and that's all. And I go back and I watch the episode. We just rewatched it on Wormhole Extremists, and I think part of it is, okay, look at these people's hardware. Look at where they're coming from. We have to play it a little bit safer with them, because where they come, many may come after. And I think that partly plays into his decision, but also, even considering everything that he's gone through, I think part of it is the passage of time. He's more reasonable, at least, to listen. And the Cor-ai allows, at the very least, a platform for him to listen and hear about the triumphs of this man since he has turned from his false god. And, balancing that performance, most of this comes down to the script, but balancing that performance as an actor, has to be pretty tricky, because you're trying to make sure that the performance is as authentic as possible without coming off as disingenuous.
Yeah. And I think the character, Hanno, really wanted to just kill him right off. But there were principles, or, a foundation in that society that wants to grow right. It didn't want to become a mayhem of, strength is the ruling force. It wants to be a society where it has those laws that everyone adheres to, and that's what's going to make us a better society. And so he was really convinced by those around him to restrain, and to pull back. And also, I think Hanno was a leader within that society, so he had to set an example that was correct in terms of his position in that community. And so following through on the Cor-ai was the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And I think he felt confident he was going to win, especially with the way that Christopher played Teal'c, and that he was just ready to accept his punishment.
This case represents the many.
Yeah,
And Rick says, well, Jack says it should not. That the dichotomy of those two warriors, both of them, depending on your view, guilty of God knows what in service to their governments, their countries. The moral tightrope walk at play is delicious, and I think really as an audience member going back and watching it, this is one of the first ones that you could really see that they're sinking their teeth into, and we're just kind of like on the edge of our seat saying, you know, this applies to both of them, you know.
yeah.
And Jack is arguing, you know, for himself as much as for Teal'c when you really look beneath the surface.
Yeah, he's going to transgress the law of this society that he's walked into, and also his own society. If he just rushes in and takes him away or creates conflict with this community, he's taken us backwards in terms of what law can bring to a society.
Mm-hmm.
True justice, you know, to how do we get true justice? And of course it poses all kinds of other questions. It's like, is because somebody did something in the past, should they, you know, feel punishment for that? Something that happened, whatever, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, should they be responsible for that in the present?
Absolutely. That's just
That one, you know, stirs a lot of thinking.
Of course, you know, and sci-fi is the best play because it's all these genres. You can tell these stories, you know, Nuremberg level questions and get away with it in science fiction because it puts a fair amount of distance between us and the subject matter so that we can take it all in as an audience member and go, okay, based on this set of circumstances, were I placed in this situation, how would I do any better? You know?
Yeah.
So
And people change, right? People change, people go through change, and what, as I mean, I think back to myself as a foolish teenager, you know,
right.
I'm so happy. I mean, those experiences, I regret to think about them, but now I know that they were a learning experience to make me wiser and to guide me into making better decisions as I went forward. And then there's the responsibility of being a warrior, being a soldier, and what you're asked to do, and how you weigh that with your conscience. You know, can you do that? But I guess once you sign up as a soldier, and that's your job, and you're going to be asked to do things that you don't want to do in your conscience, but you end up doing, and then you have to live with those things, and that's huge, you know. And I imagine the military people that follow Stargate really saw that within the themes of the show, because they know they could be asked at any point to drop a bomb on someone or to do, you know, something atrocious that they would never want done to their own family, but it's their responsibility
They live with forever.
yeah. Yeah.
So
So that those themes are so strong. I mean, it's like those are powerful themes for you know, a 47-minute sci-fi, right? It's huge.
absolutely. My only issue with the episode, and they hang a lantern on it earlier on, you know, we're overdue for a visit, is the time, but you have to buy it, you know, is the timing of the arrival of the opportunity for Teal'c to redeem himself. And Hanno has to see that change. He has to witness it himself to understand what journey of transformation this particular Jaffa has been on since last seeing him.
Yeah, it's true. And you know, the Stargate, you know, I think that we just, yeah, like you say, you have to be open to whatever can come through there, right? It's like at any time. And that's part of buying into the show and what it's all about. And I mean, coincidence does happen. Serendipity does happen. Things do happen in life. So why can't we buy it in science fiction?
Absolutely. The scene at the episode at the end, with even Teal'c is like, I am the one, you know, and I was like, I think you slayed that man.
Yeah.
is a great scene, and it works. I think that the pieces were set up properly so that we can go back and as an audience and say, yeah, yeah, Teal'c has had an opportunity to really show his quality, if I'm going to borrow from Tolkien,
Yeah.
in this episode. And we as an audience, we buy that. Yes, this is an excuse for him to be redeemed, but will Hanno buy it? And
Yeah.
I think it works.
Yeah. And the other Stargate members also, I mean, they know that Tilk has come through what his past, and and so that they're confident of that, but and they're making every effort to save him. But at the same time, they have to weigh that question of, well, what about what he did? What he's done in the past, and can they continue to love him knowing that he's murdered so many people, which may not have been as evident at, to them up until this point, that he has this dark past.
Yeah. Did you see the Arc of Truth, the DVD movie that came after the series?
I saw some of it. Sorry, don't remember it clearly.
I'm going to send you a scene after later on today at some point that he has a conversation with another person who is in a very similar situation as him, and it's mostly just a monologue of Teal'c saying that you've done terrible things, and at the same time that even though you can never forgive yourself, you must seek out justice for those who cannot seek it out for themselves. It calls back to Cor-ai, and it says this is that his journey toward seeking redemption will never be complete, but that every single act builds on overcoming what he was before.
Yeah, and we all have to do that,
Yeah.
and so we have to
Absolutely.
grow in the time that we have.
It wasn't a year later you came back as Simon in an episode, Demons, and this was a very different kind of character with a very different. I mean, there was still gold oppression there, but there was also an internal oppression in this particular society. What do you remember about Simon?
Well, yeah, I like the fact that he was different than Hanno. I like the fact that he was on the other end of the spectrum in terms of bravery, his
Right.
weakness, and trying to do things in a spiritual fashion, and trying to really protect the innocent, but not having the strength or courage to do anything about it. That was an interesting one. And in terms of my journey in getting the role, is that I did the drive to Vancouver all night in the winter, and I got there. I arrived at a friend's place at about 3, 4 in the morning, and I went in. I had my bike. I had a bunch of stuff because I was going to stay there for a while. I was hoping to do some auditions in Vancouver. I went into my friends and I said, do you think my bike's okay back out there in my van? Should I bring it in or lock it up or something? He said, yeah, it's not really a great neighborhood. I went outside, my van was gone. Everything was gone that I had. I was in my socks. I had a t-shirt, jeans, and I had the sides for the audition for Stargate in my pocket, fortunately, because my audition was at 9 o'clock that morning. So I went in, I borrowed some boots and a coat from my friend, and I went into this audition, but my mind was just like, all my stuff is gone. All my clothes, like tools.
Your car.
My writing is a van, yeah, full of stuff. I was planning on staying there for a month. And so I think Peter DeLuise saw the desperation, and he wanted that type of energy within the character. So I think it really helped. And then he said, "Oh, well, you cut your hair, and of course I do like my hair." So I said, "Sure," and I let them. When I got there, I was so excited because it was really something I needed a break after that. And they shaved my hair, and I kept one strand. You never really see it in the show.
Oh, really?
But Peter was great, and he really really kept me relaxed through the experience. And I enjoyed it. I do a lot of studying in theology, so I always like to learn a little bit more about spirituality and Christianity and things like that. I'm just fascinated by it. So I loved.
It's where we come from. I mean, there's a religious background to all of us. You go far back enough.
Yeah, and of
So,
course it has that medieval feeling too,
mhm.
which is the dark ages and all that. So the set was fantastic. They really built that whole town there. That it was just a great place to work. And of course, we were also working within the forest areas of North Van, and I really enjoyed that experience. And of course, coming back to the Stargate family there, and being so welcomed there was excellent.
The Deloise, that was his second season working on the show. Just one of my favorite people. Period. Um, that particular episode was the second time we had seen an Unas before, so that was kind of cool. And I can't imagine what it was like for that guy under that suit with the makeup and everything else. Um, what was it like dealing with? Did you have any issues dealing with the environment and out of doors? I meant to ask you this on Cor-ai as well. Being up in the mountain and in the forested area there, were there any days that just shut production down?
No, we were really lucky there. I've had
Yeah.
that happen on Outer Limits experiences where suddenly the rain comes, and you can shoot to a certain amount in the rain, but after a while, it's just you lose it. It becomes all grain across your screen, and sound gets really bad, and so forth. But no, that worked out really well. It was all beautiful weather. I enjoyed just the transition and arc of Simon,
Mm.
going from a character that's so afraid, so oppressed, and finding those steps with the team to find some courage and to be a part of change, to again, in some ways, um, freeing the team and being a part of that, freeing the society from tyranny. That seemed to be a theme that carried over from Hanno in some way.
No,
Um,
and a much more active participant in the transformation in this change as well. Laura Minnell played Mary, and she was someone who Simon had agreed to at least a year before to assist with or at least to help watch after, you
yeah.
know. And she is, when we come upon the village, has been selected because of her. I think she had chickenpox, if I'm not mistaken,
That's right. Yeah.
to be taken by this thing, you know. And he's got to do something to stop it. And then we've got SG-1 to come in and help, shift
Yeah.
things around a little bit.
Medieval days when they would identify a witch, right?
Correct.
The society would, oh, let's get rid of her. And
Right.
hopefully,
Exactly. But I love this episode because it shows those shades of gray where even when you have an evil person like the canon doing evil things, uh, when the chips are down, you look to Simon, and the Unas is coming after them, and Simon's still protecting his leader despite he's physically standing between the Unas and his leader, despite whatever this guy has done to him or his family or the people he has loved in the past. The hero, you can't deny the heroism of this guy. It's truly defined right then and there. When the chips are down, he rises to the occasion.
yeah, and it's a learned thing because he sees in the Stargate team that courage and their understanding of what his society is starts to dawn on him a little bit more. I don't think he loses his faith, which is the
Mm-mm.
reason why he would protect his leader, because
Mm-hmm.
it's so intrinsic. And in a dark world, what else do you hang on to? You
Mm-hmm.
really need something that says to you, okay, there's better life beyond
Mm-hmm.
this horrid experience that I'm having. And so you attach yourself to that faith, and it's that faith that gets you through those times that are tragic or horrific.
Hmm.
Uh, and so Simon had that, at least, as a basis for his bravery. That
Hmm.
if he is going to step into the realm of danger, he's taken care of spiritually.
Well, it's one of my as a Christian, it's one of my personal favorite moments of the show when Theona says, "Your God has abandoned you," and he stands tall and he said, "My God is with me always." And in his heart of hearts, he's spiritually a rock, no matter what happens to him in the physical. It's one of my favorite moments of the series. Someone who is truly exercising all the best parts of himself to save the people that he loves in an unjust situation.
And it's interesting, the themes are, you see, the imprisonment in
Mm-hmm.
Cor-ai, and then you see the imprisonment in demons as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so that finding getting a freedom finding freedom, and then there's the larger metaphor of us being imprisoned here on the planet, and how the gate is a way out, as a way to go beyond what we feel restrained to. uh,
Correct.
that I saw that, thought that was kind of interesting, that both those episodes had that element in there.
And it's interesting though, their escape from it is to bury the gate in this particular situation rather than to go to another planet and get in trouble. So there's a lot of those elements there. You came back uh, several seasons later and on a completely different version of the franchise for Atlantis as Avrid in, I believe was it season two? It was season two. It was season two, and a lot of work with Joe Flanagan in this episode. Tell us about that experience.
It was. I really enjoyed coming back. Always, like, to come back into work with people that I'm familiar with. So the crew there was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
crossover in the crew. Martin Wood, I had known from Edmonton. He was
Okay.
here in the series. I think it was Jake and the Kid where I met him, and he was an assistant director way back when. I was in a season of that. And so he was around, and then producers, you were around. So it was that kind of familiarity. Working outdoors, I really liked. And again,
Mm-hmm.
it was a spiritual character, which, okay, this is great. They saw something in me that they liked, in terms of that quality that they thought would be right for the character of Avrid. Again, he starts off, kind of afraid, right? Reluctant to engage in stopping the tyranny that they're suffering, and yet, again, carrying a spiritual nature of, peace is the way against the violence,
Mm-hmm.
um, and eventually finding the courage again. So that quality was there. um, Great cast. Joe was just, again, just you don't always get this, David, where you go in a show and the main cast is so open and warm and, relaxed and really encouraging. It doesn't happen all the time. Usually people are so worried about success, that they miss the opportunity to engage with the people that come in and out of the show, and really get to know them, or help them to feel more comfortable in their world that they have to go through every day, long hours and so on. So Joe was one of those great guys he's absolutely like that. From my memory, he was just totally welcoming, and really easy to work with.
You can definitely see the different time of year in this episode that in terms of the season in Vancouver and when it was shot, because it's all sunny and gorgeous and everyone's in, that not there's not a lot of mud on the ground. And I think it really lent itself to the beauty of this sanctuary field that they were inside of as well. And you guys got to spend, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much all of that production on location.
Pretty much, yeah, yeah. Even the interiors were there. They were
Right.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it's a similar. The episode's called Epiphany, by the by. Haven't brought that up. That there is a similar arc there where the community in this particular situation has to overcome a shared threat that is keeping them from finding their true path and rejoining the rest of their kind.
Yes, and Joe the character was there to help them do that, right? And they recognized that he was the one that was going to help them get to the ascension that they were moving towards, and the reason they were in the sanctuary was to ascend. So yeah, it's again a similar theme in that, and I think the writers are drawing from so much of our history in that way, and the show itself, like Stargate, is one of my fascinations with it is its historical aspects of it, that they're finding, archaeology and things that guide them forward. And so here's a realm that's been isolated from the rest of the universe, and that isolation in itself is the barrier to their ascension. They need the fear of outside, what's outside, and in a way creates that monster, that invisible, powerful oppressor that's there. And yeah, I think those are really strong themes that we need to get beyond nationhood in some way, or even, where our neighborhood is the only thing. We have to know that it's our interaction with others that makes us better as a whole.
Looking at these 3 episodes, it really does show how threats can come from abroad, but also help comes from abroad as well. And you have to be, well, in this 3rd episode of the situation, they were literally self-contained. No one could really come in easily. But, always be open to the possibility of new knowledge and new information and new experiences from others. It's not always just going to be, this person is only a threat. I think that these episodes really share in the potential of learning and growing, like you said, from others, from beyond our borders.
Yeah, and our own philosophies, like we have to at least open our mind enough to hear the different perspectives. And then that can carry us forward because we weigh it against our own beliefs and realize that there are some commonalities. And that's what we should enjoin ourselves to in order to make a better world and a better experience for all, as opposed to just myself. I'm okay. I don't need to mix with anybody else. Well,
what are you missing?
Yeah. What's comes in makes you better,
That's right. And Shepard, when he first shows up, they have the montages of time passing. You don't want to sit there and meditate, he's a warrior. This is not what he does. He'd much rather be, running and gunning. But he also takes from them as well. And I think finds a degree of inner peace that he didn't before.
Yeah, you see that in the show. He goes from being really bored with the whole thing and then he starts to just kind of allow it to happen to him. I'd love to see that kind of arc continue for him, but I mean, he didn't go down that path where he just becomes more of a spiritual leader in some way.
But it indicates that we are capable of those things if we of things that we don't think that we can do if we quiet our minds and listen to ourselves a little bit more. If I take anything away from Epiphany, it's to slow down and listen to your inner voices a little bit more and filter out some of the noise in the world, and be receptive to those who are trying to tell you something. So
yeah, isn't it great how just television shows can kind of bring that into your contemplation?
Absolutely. I think Stargate specifically, you can on the surface just watch it as an action, particularly Atlantis, as an action show, or you can. There is philosophy to pull from it if you so choose, like Star Wars. It's very, very similar in that way.
Yeah.
So
and each show has themes that they want to explore and they want the audiences to think about and to take away
yep.
and into their own lives, and that is an enrichment, and that's what brings us back to those shows when we are being enriched by them. If it is just all action, okay, that's entertainment, but you're not thinking about that beyond the show.
Correct.
It's when it has something that it wants to say and it struggles with, whether it's a theme that is controversial, then it's creating that that thought that in everybody, in every viewer, and they toss it around in the people within their lives, and so are broadened by doing so.
Absolutely. I've got some fan questions for you. Are we good on time?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Lockwatcher, you landed roles in both SG-1 and Atlantis. Were there any differences in working between the two casts?
The only difficulty for me there was that I didn't get to work with other cast members outside of Joe.
Yeah.
So all my interaction was him, except for one scene where they come in and there's the combative against the beast. I think that with the Stargate, that first season, they were really getting to know it themselves, and you could see that they were trying to figure out their characters and their relationships with each other and the crew. And I came in as a guest on that, and I was really welcomed by everyone, but I could tell that it was a beginning, and no one really knew where it was going to go. The next time that I came in, it was really established. They were who they were. And I also came back. I brought some of my college students. I was teaching college at one point, and for a couple of years, a motion picture arts program. And I brought 8 of my students into Vancouver to introduce them to agents in the community. Called up Stargate, and they said, "Oh, bring them all down." So I was able to bring all my students down, and they got to meet them and wander around set. And
it was during Atlantis?
During SG-1.
During SG-1.
So that was just so great. And coming back years later to do Atlantis, I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
But it had a very similar feel in terms of that first year of Stargate, where they were getting to know each other and who their characters are, and they were starting to get a rhythm. You could see that rhythm was happening. That it becomes like a machine, a well-oiled machine. They know exactly what they're going to do on a day-to-day basis, and the stress just kind of disappears, which makes the craft better.
Correct.
So,
Spider Mag wanted to know, is there an actor that you've worked with that inspired you to really sharpen your craft?
Peter Donnet. I don't know if you know Peter Donnet. I worked with him in a production of Man for All Seasons here at the Citadel Theatre. I played the common man, and he was Sir Thomas More. And I watched everything he did from first day rehearsal to the final performance. I would sit in the VOMs of a thrust stage, and when he was on stage and I wasn't, I was watching him. I was riveted to his work. And what I found was that everything was fresh every time. There was no, I'm going to do it like I did it before. He was listening so well and just naturally in the moment without any artifice attached to his performance. I was smitten by it. So he's the one guy in terms of the craft of acting in theater that I really was amazed by. I got to work with John Vernon if you remember John Vernon, the dean from American Graffiti.
Okay.
And we did an independent film together, and he was so intense in his work. Everything had to be right. I remember, the first reading I did with him, they were trying to put a certain costume, test a costume on him. And he rejected that costume completely because he really felt he knew this guy. And it became combative with the wardrobe head, and that wardrobe head was fired as a result.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this guy is he's bent on knowing who he is, and he wants to stay with that. He was a gentleman in the work process, but once that camera rolled, there was a click And I enjoyed that experience a lot, just to see how that man worked. And he had done so much television by that point, so he was another guy that I attached my eyes to, and watching and listening and trying to pick up as much as I could.
I don't know. I mean, to have that kind of control over, I would not wear that as that person. to
Why
the
would
point
you
of,
argue? Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not arguing. He's the lead, right?
yeah, that's the thing. That's what it comes down to, I suppose.
Yeah.
Rick Donner, what theater techniques do you think helped you translate to television and film?
One of the things that I kept hearing, that props and costumes, and just camera, everybody appreciated, was the type of discipline that I brought, and I really picked that up in training as a stage actor. There's no room for error when you're walking out on a stage that is live and the audience is there. So your preparation is so important. And then the respect of the craft. So, how you hang up your costumes at the end of a day, and how you take care of things, how you protect your costume, how you protect your props, and all the work that they're doing for you to help you perform. I never neglected that, and I think that discipline came from the theater, and I continually apply it, and it's a sign of respect, and for everyone that's working on it in a collaborative form. I think that sometimes actors bypass that, and they get to where there's an ego, and maybe it's part of trying to hang on to a confidence, but they somehow treat the crew as less. They're all knowing, and the crew, well, the crew's looking at you, right? They're the eyes. They're the ones that see that your hair's out of place, or that your costume is not right, or whatever it might be, or your words aren't perfect, and things like that. So just respect for them is something that I really think translated well from the theater into the craft of film and television. Though they are two different beasts, yeah, the thing of I was saying earlier about just bring it back, just bring it back. And when I was so trained to be large,
Right. They're out there in the crowd,
yeah,
they're not right up here in a lens.
looking at your eyelash, you
Yeah.
just know. So that reeling it in is something that you're not going to get from the theater, but the theater will give you the confidence to adapt, to change, to know that it's okay to do that. And because if you've gone through doing large roles, or any role on a stage in front of a large audience live every time, you gain a real grounded sense of your ability, and the ability to change it, to manipulate it, and turn it into something that's right.
Adjust from one take to another. Have you ever asked, for another take to be done? It's like to try it a different way.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, sometimes I just felt I didn't do it. Didn't find the emotion that was correct for that particular response or reaction. Um, Sometimes it's what's going on in your own life that kind of gets in the way in some ways. So you can easily be distracted. Sometimes things are broken up. So I was doing one movie, and it was a very emotional scene, and the director cut halfway through this take, because they wanted a different angle on it or something. And I was like, I have to start from the beginning in order to make that happen. I can't just cut now, bring it up there. It's like you need some emotional flow to that. So yeah, I have asked, but not often. I like to hand it over, to them in their eyes, as particularly the director who has all the knowledge as to what the end result should be.
Yeah, but you have to work to that end result.
So I'm going to trust that.
Right? It's like, hey, buddy, if this sucks from starting from B instead of A, you'll know why. So
Yeah, your name's on it too.
that's right, exactly. Pac-Man D3, I think we kind of answered that one, but maybe not necessarily what you think the biggest difference and challenges between acting on stage and TV or film.
Yeah, and also, like one to add to a little bit more, um, vocal quality. Like we'll see it so much today, and for me as a theater trained actor, I'm often frustrated when I'm watching television and particularly film.
Mm.
It's all talk like this. Everything comes down to there's, and I'm going, what? What did you say? Those words are important. I want to hear. But because that mic is hidden right here or whatever it is, or the boom is just above them, there's no pushing it. It's just all in check. And I think that's a really good thing to apply when you're doing television and film. It's just, it'll stop you from being too big. It'll stop you from putting, too much on this small screen. Just pull it all in.
Pull it all back.
Yeah.
Melissa Smith, is any special moment in your career that still sticks out and has encouraged you moving forward in your craft?
Encouragement, encouragement comes often from the people around you that have said, hey, that was great. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. Or I was touched by that. Or, most of my accolades that I really hang on to as a person are the ones that I got from my students. Because, I spent a lot of time with them on a daily basis and so forth. And when I'd get a card at the end of the year, or I'd get a kid come up and say thank you for getting them through a production that they didn't think they would get through, those are the things that have moved me forward and made me love the art so much more. In terms of the biz, it's hard to think right off the top, but I know that there's been lots of them where someone has come up and just said, hey, I really enjoyed what you just did with that. And I just take that, put it in my pocket.
Absolutely. For a rainy day when it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I don't think I did very well today.
Yeah.
You're going to have bad days. There, especially when you're doing a run of a show where you do 60, 90 iterations of it. Outside is going to interfere with inside, and I mean, having done it in high school, and you just have to do the best you can to filter it out, or maybe incorporate it into the intensity of a performance,
Yeah, and so
let's
often,
try a little different tonight.
Myself included, we often are our worst critics, right? So, auditioning is a horrid world. It's a terrible place to be, because you don't get the direction that you need, and as an actor, you take confidence in the idea that you can change. You can, if somebody gives you a note, okay, I'll apply that note or those notes to this next scene. But when you're auditioning, you get no notes. You get a very small little bio as to who the character might be. And your side might be a scene or two scenes or something within a larger story that you're not privy to. So it's kind of a guessing game, rolling the dice, do what you think is right and hope that it gets you the chance to perform further. So yeah, it's a tough world. You criticize yourself all the time and going, oh, I could have done that better. I could have done that better. But then sometimes you overthink it as well. It's like, I should have just gone with the first take, right? Just let it happen.
Right.
And then decide, whether that's the right or not.
Well, Stephen King talks about, often his first go at a sentence when he's writing, he says, you can always go back and you can always rework it. You will always find more words if you need to re-examine a sentence that you've created. But is it really going to make it that much better? Sometimes your first instincts are your first instincts for a reason.
Yeah. And then you overthink it and you add too much to it and it becomes too much.
Right.
Stephen King's also great on terms of taking away words, right? We say too much so often. Just clip, 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 bring it down to its essence.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Second draft equals first draft minus 10%.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I remember from him. Tracy, are you currently working on any projects you can talk about?
I'm working on a very exciting project I can't talk about. NDA,
Okay.
non-disclosure agreements. So yeah, I'm really excited this particular month. I'm doing something far out. So I'll hold off on that one.
Well,
So I
please
don't.
email us. So, or I'll also be keeping an eye on the Googles as well for that one. We'll definitely share that. So, and last but certainly not least, Teresa MC, would you step through the Stargate if given the opportunity?
Yes, I would. I used to always go with when we get into those morbid conversations, like what are you going to do when you die? Like, are you going to get cremated or buried? I always said I always wanted to be shot into space. So if they had a Stargate, they could just like shuffle me through there. But yeah, I mean, if there was a Stargate right now, I think I would go. I would. I'm an explorer. I love getting out into the mountains and into the woods, and I love canoeing and stuff like that. So I think any adventure is really exciting. I love traveling. My wife and I travel a lot, and we continue to look for opportunities to do more of that. So I would travel through the gate for sure.
Mm. One,
You?
me?
Yeah.
I think I would, with a written guarantee of survival.
No guarantees in life.
Of course I would. Yeah, absolutely. Last question for you. Misadventures of a Little Wolf. What do you do in your downtime? What do you do to free yourself from your
There's
the
a lot of things I'm doing. I'm retired,
yeah.
so I've got a lot of free time right now. One of the things I'm doing is a lot of Duolingo, learning Spanish.
Okay.
Reviewing French, and I'm also learning Hebrew,
Oh.
just for something to do. I'm reading lots. I've written a lot of poetry throughout my life. So the problem is that it's all in pencil and in cursive writing. So I'm slowly doing all the typing of it, of my collections of poetry.
Nice.
I do some script writing, just on the side. I do some supply teaching. I'll be covering 10 one-acts next week, helping them, a bunch of students, get through some one-acts, both in terms of their tech and their performances. So yeah, my days are filled, but the nice thing about being retired is that I can go, no.
Exactly right. I was like, yeah, this guy sounds like he's retired. Not.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm retired in that I can say no.
yeah,
There
I
you
can.
go. David, this has been a real pleasure for me,
Pleasure.
sir. I love having you, and thank your significance to the body of work that is this show is it's a big deal to have you. So I really appreciate having you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I wished I would have done more. I enjoyed the experience so much. I'm happy that it's being celebrated by so many fans,
Hmm.
because the people that were involved in it were just excellent.
Yeah.
And they deserve it.
Philippe Canat said, "Yeah, we would have liked to have seen you on Destiny as well in Stargate Universe." It's like, yeah, there's only that show got cut way too short, so it's entirely possible he's out there floating around. So,
Let's hope there's a new one, right?
oh,
There's a
absolutely, yes, sir. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up on my end. I really, really appreciate you joining me today, sir, and all the
Thank you.
best to you.
My pleasure, and thanks, fans.
Thank you, David. Be well. David McNally with Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis. Thank you so much for tuning in today. A couple of questions for me. I know my volume has been an issue. I am working on that. I just tried a new cable and a new port on the computer. So I apologize. I'm still tweaking that. General Maximus says Sundays are perfect for me for the show. Just wanted to let you know that if it is a permanent switch, consider making it. So Wormhole Extremist is on Sundays, and right now we're going to keep the bulk of the Dial the Gate interviews on Saturdays, unless a guest makes a special request because they can't make it. We've got John Delancey, Q, coming up in a Wednesday in a couple of weeks from now, a week and a half or so. So keep an eye on the schedule at dialthegate.com for all of those details. And if you enjoyed the episode, consider giving us a like as well. My thanks to my producer, Linda Gategabber Fury, as well as my moderating team, Summer, Tracy, Jeremy, Reese, and Anthony. Anthony really stepped up today. We've got some power outage problems because of the weather across the Americas, so we're making it happen for you guys as well. And big thanks to Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web, our web developer who makes the show continue to go. My thanks again to David McNally today for making this episode possible. He is one of my favorite guest stars from SG-1 and Atlantis, so it was really a privilege to have him. Jonathan Glassner is pre-recorded and coming up in just 55 minutes. So he's going to be talking about the Ark and sharing more memories from Stargate SG-1 as well, the first 3 seasons. And after him, next week, we have on February the 11th at 12 noon, currently scheduled, James Tishner, visual effects producer and writer, Stargate SG-1, and at 12 noon Pacific time. And then Anna Galvin at 4 p.m. Pacific time as well. Multiple roles in Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. She's one of the few actors that did all 3. I may have a 2 o'clock booking here. I'm trying to get a certain YouTuber on who's been doing a rewatch of Stargate. So if we get him, we'll definitely let you all know between here and there. Keep an eye on the social channels, and I hope you join us for Wormhole Extremists tomorrow, because we're doing Tin Man and There But For the Grace of God on the Wormhole Extremist channel starting at 12 noon Pacific time. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. I really appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you on the other side. If I can find my end title button.